For our friends who are going to join us later, this is Kara Zone. We are super excited to have her today. She is an author and just an awesome person. I'm
Oh.
looking for my questions still. Okay.
And Rachel is also equally awesome. And thank you everybody for wanting to hear me
Of
speak.
course. Of
Appreciate
course.
it.
Yeah. We are super grateful to have you today. Awesome. So we're going to jump into some questions. We sent over some questions about indie publishing as well as Kara's book. She wrote a book. I read it. It was great. I loved it.
Oh,
I
thanks.
left you a review because I was like,
I
this is so cool.
I did
Uh,
see it. Yes.
I'm so glad. So I just wanted to start with well, we'll start with all the questions, but the first thing I wanted to say is I think it's really important to have people like you coming and talking to groups like this because I wanted to be very clear about something before we get into like any topics. So I am a writing coach, as we know, and I help students decide a lot of things about their books, especially whether or not to try and traditionally publish or to self-publish or to independently publish, which I know you know a lot about.
I do.
Um, and one of the things that feels kind of icky for me to admit, but I'm glad that we kind of got here as like for myself and for my students, is I see a lot of people making decisions about the type of publishing they want to pursue based off of bias or, lack of information or fear. And so the first thing I want to say is like, thank you for coming and talking to us because like it's really important to have an educated decision when you make a decision as to what types of publishing you're going to pursue. I try to be very clear with my students, like, you can make whatever choice you want, but let's make sure to make it a good choice. And
Yeah.
so I just want that to be like abundantly clear to anyone watching now and in the future that there's not a wrong way to do it, but
Mm-mm.
we can learn a lot about it. So that's what I
Yeah.
want to start with. Anyway, did you want to say something about that, Kara?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. I wasn't trying to talk over
No, you're
you.
good. You're good.
But honestly, what's really cool about the publishing industry, and I think what so many people don't understand um, before they give up, because this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I've seen too many people give up and they didn't have to. But just because you even just because you choose one route doesn't mean that you're stuck in that route. And you just it's really it's it's a pretty, depending on which route you take, it can be a little bit more rigid and it can be a little bit more slow moving, but that doesn't mean that you have to stay there. But I'll talk more about that in a second. I just love how flexible things
Yeah.
can be if you're privy to that information.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think especially with newer writers and even like when I was first like getting into this and like studying for all of these, like what route am I going to take? There's a lot of fear. And so
Uh-huh.
I think the important part of having these conversations is to take away that fear again, so we can make an informed choice and not a fear choice, because those are
Uh-huh.
two very different things.
Very.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of the questions that we sent over. I'm so excited to hear what you're going to say about this stuff. So the first one that was sent over by our students, and this is one I have as well, is for you personally, Kara, what made you choose independent publishing over traditional publishing?
um So I started my novel, I was like 28 years old. So that was like 13, 14 years ago. And the indie publishing world and the publishing world in general was a vastly different place, even though it was only like, we'll say 15 years. It was insanely different. Um, Instagram, I don't even know if, I mean, it may have just been like a year or two old, like
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah.
And in that time, so many tools have come out for indie publishers, and it is, nothing is easy in publishing at all. Traditional publishing, indie publishing, hybrid, nothing is easy. So I'm just going to say that first, but the tools that were created by people who are actually doing indie publishing have been a huge help, and if you know how to use those, it makes it a little bit easier. So I back in, I'm going to say 2008, I got this idea for my novel. It was 160,000 words when I was done. There were like multiple books coming afterwards just in my brain. And I never had believed in myself as a writer. I just couldn't stop these characters from talking to me. I had to do it. And the only way to get published back then, respectably, was to get an agent. And the golden ticket was this agent. And if you got an agent to talk to you, that meant you were going to be Stephen King level. I didn't know it at the time, but that was a big load of puff. I mean, it was just like, it was just a dream. And reality, obviously set in. I had to take a break from writing because I left, my husband and I got divorced, and I had my kids, and I wanted to go to college and really learn how to be a writer, with always coming back to this idea. But when I came back, I had my feet more grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was really hearing and seeing, I started in 2019, I started back, but what I was really hearing and seeing about the world, in just the publishing world in general, is that even if you get an agent, that agent has to sell your book to 5 other people, the editor, the publishing house, those people, blah, blah, blah. And then once you do that, you still kind of have to do all the groundwork. If you get a big enough deal, maybe they'll get you into the right sections, they'll do that kind of stuff. But if you don't market yourself, sometimes nothing happens. So that was that route. And then I came across a lot of these people who were doing these academies. And these academies are peddling, like, if you publish a book a month, you'll be a millionaire. So that was also another huge, like, well, that's a big load of crap also.
Yeah.
Because those people weren't marketing themselves. And throughout my 2 or 3 years, doing it with being a ghostwriter, learning everything I could about indie publishing, and then really diving into hard-based reality, I really got anchored into a really good way. And what I've seen is that people can get agents and they can get published, and they can do that route like that. Personally, I have so much anxiety, and my energy was really geared towards, well, I'm going to do whatever I want anyway. I'll send out a few things, but I have this option of indie publishing. Plus, there are so many stories, and they're real. They're not like crap. Like they're not, here's a golden ticket and you get the chocolate factory, dreams. But there's so many authors that are on social media right now that got rejected 1 billion times over, self-published, proved their worth. Somebody came to them. So that's why I'm saying there's like a ton of different options.
Yeah.
I am the type of person where if something is important to me, I'll go towards that.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to wait anymore, because it was 15 years and I know how the traditional publishing works, and waiting for an answer, waiting for a response, waiting mostly for rejections. Not that I would be rejected all. My book is, well written. And
yeah.
A good story.
I've read it. I can attest to that.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I'm talking too long also.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. But so I did it really with the intention of whatever road I'm going to go down, I'm going to still be published. So I just couldn't justify to myself, to my book, to make it important enough to me anymore to get an agent. Eventually I might need one. Eventually, I have to lay the foundation down. There's different things. My husband and I are opening up our indie press, and we're doing that. Because I have such a strong education that I've learned from 2019 to 2024 when I started writing my novel. And I'm learning every day, because
absolutely, yeah.
There's never not change. And there's never going to be some day that I'm going to be like, all right, I know enough, because it's not that way. Yeah. But in the process of getting, deciding that I'm not going to do traditional, I did talk to an agent. And she basically told me the same thing. You have to be visible. You have to show publishing houses that you can know how to market yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I recently had a colleague who got traditionally or she's getting all kinds of responses from agencies now because she is presenting herself well. She also worked really hard on her novel, like she busted her ass. But the agents are coming to her Instagram stuff and they're seeing that she knows how to market herself, and she has gotten several responses. She had like 100+ like letters out and she wasn't getting anything, and she was finally like, you know what, I'm just going to publish this in June. You know how to do it. Can you help me? And we have such a good community where we were going to be like, okay, let's do this. And then the agents, and I don't want it to sound like the golden ticket, but then she's gotten at least 5 agents who are interested, and she's turning some agents away. And like, there's this, they're clamoring. She did a lot of really hard work to get her query letter to that point, but it is possible.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what, like, I got it in my head where like, I'm going to do it on my own. If I do a good enough job, or I'll continue to, do what I know is working and leave what's not behind me, somebody will see me and they'll want to work with me too. So on the latter note, I joined this mastermind. It's all indie publishers. Her name is Alessandra Torres. She runs it with her sisters. And she is a New York Times best-selling author 7 times over. She had an agent. She does all of this stuff. She has had screenplays produced. She still has her agent, but she also does indie publishing.
Yeah.
So she has her name and foot in one door, and she has her foot in the other door. And like I said, there's everything is open. You just have to figure out how to do it for yourself.
Yeah. And I think something that I can kind of hear you getting at that I really like is that it's not easy, no matter which way you take. And I think I've talked with people in the past who take a certain route because they think they can, do less work. I'm gonna do less work for this. And how I usually explain to them is like, it's where you put your work. It's, you're going to put it, the front end, the back end, all the way through. There's hard work to be found no matter which route you take, if you are committed to being successful. And I just love that you kept bringing that up, because I think something that is misconceived a lot about independent authors or, self-published authors is that, there's a lot of negative connotations around it, a lot of judgment. And I say this as someone that used to be really, really judgmental towards self-published authors. Like, I feel really yucky about it, but I'm not going to lie. I used to think that people who didn't want to go the long route just were, not cut out for it. But becoming more educated, like you said, learning more, looking more into the process, and learning more about the market, learning how publishing houses make their money, learning all about this stuff. I realized that, first of all, neither's wrong. No. And also, it just really depends on what your goals are and what's important to you in the process. And if your goals are to write a story that resonates with you and to prove your merit through your own hard work, I see no issue with being independently published, Right.
And a lot of people don't understand that when they step into that field, and it's really heart-wrenching. It's I was talking to somebody last week. I'm like, my ego has been ground into a powder at this point.
Yes.
Because from 2021 to 2024 kicked my ass to the point where I'm not impervious to hardship, because it's hard. Yeah. But I'm just like, I'm already rolling down the hill. I'm going to keep going.
Right. Yeah. It takes a lot more to move the needle now. I get that. 100%. Awesome.
Definitely is a strength builder.
Yeah. We call those in our family, we call them character building moments, because oh boy. Yeah. All right. So could you give us like a brief walkthrough on your publishing process, just the steps that you took, anything you would recommend or not recommend for our students who are watching?
Well, very first and foremost, don't give up. And that's 100%. Like, the only way, and I like this because the only way you fail is if you give up.
Yes, I agree.
In indie publishing, you can always pivot. I think in anything you can always pivot, but I'm here specifically for indie publishing. It is never you make a mistake. It is never the end of the world. It'll feel like it for a minute, and then pick it up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward, because there's always going to be another way. Something that I've really learned from these mastermind. The mastermind is indie publishers who ranging from all spans of expertise. Some people haven't published yet. Some people have been doing it for 15 years. And one of the amazing things that sort of solidifies the way that I feel, and I'm hoping that it resonates with you guys, is that even if you put out a stinker, you can rewrite it and reformat it and republish it as something else. It may be similar, but if a traditionally, like if a trad publisher has that copy, that is the copy that they have, and they own it, and you can't do anything to it to make it better. That is what I understand about that. Not a negative, because it may do well, but so most of the authors that I've spoken with or listened to their conversations, they all want to go back and fix their first novel. And some of them can't, because somebody owns their rights, and others have gone in, they've changed the cover, they've changed even like character names or something, they've expanded or and they can still earn something from it. So there's never not a way. And the even best thing of it is, if you do have to give it up for a little while, you can always come back and pick it back up with all of your lessons learned. So
no, that's awesome. And I really like that you said that, because I've talked with a lot of people who want to go to traditional publishing, but in all honesty, there's a lot of grief, because I have to cut so much out of my story, and there's so many characters I can't have. And what's nice about this is the creative control that we're kind of getting at here. But being able to say, if I screwed up the first time, which we all screw up things, so it's probably going to happen, then I can fix it. And it takes the pressure off. And as my experience as a coach, anytime we can take the pressure off of something, the work gets better. I have never had a good experience pressuring one of my students with something. If they're burning out, or they're feeling, like there's not enough time or something, their creativity always dips, and their skill dips, and their love of the work dips. And so anything we can do to kind of, take the gas off a little bit, slow down, breathe deeply, that in my experience has always improved the quality of the work 100 times over. So I'm really glad you said that. That's a really good point.
I mean, that is lesson learned from watching all of these people just give up. Again, they're giving up because they were peddled garbage by these academies saying all of these things. They came in with one expectation, and that's really what I try to do. Is I'm like, I'm going to bring you back down to reality. And
love it.
It is not. Anybody can do it, but you have to be prepared. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make all the mistakes. I have a colleague from the mastermind too. She and I did online conversations. She's a USA Today bestseller. She had an agent. Her agent said, you're not going to make the money that you're making right now if we get you published. She's there. And she even said, and she's indie. You can't be a USA Today bestseller or a New York Times bestseller anymore if you are indie, but that's a whole other conversation. But she is, and she's like, I have probably had my Amazon pre-orders taken away from, like, I haven't had that capable, like, she said, I made like all of the mistakes you possibly can make. They've taken her pre-order capabilities away for her at least 25 times. She always gets them back. But like there's all kinds of stuff. And she just keeps going.
You just keep chugging through. I mean, that's the same in my side of things too. Is the people who don't succeed are the people that quit. I mean, eventually, if you're willing to keep trying and you're willing to keep learning, and if you're willing to just be curious, like that's the thing. Like whenever something happens, to be curious about it. Be all right, what's going on here? What can I learn? And just approaching it with that energy, instead of, there's sort of like a self-pity mindset. Well, why are they doing this to me? Why is this happening to me? I understand where that comes from. I'm not saying I never have those feelings, but anytime we can be curious and just be like, all right, I'm just in the in crowd now because everybody goes through this, so I must be doing something right. So with
Right.
that in mind, the next question was some of the biggest challenges you faced in publishing independently. Was there anything about your book that was challenging? Anything as far as that goes?
Um, so I have a little bit of a different path than everybody else does,
Okay,
and
yeah,
everybody has their own stories. So it may touch on some things for some
for
people,
sure. Yeah.
and other things it won't. So I wrote my first draft in 2008. And I went to school after I separated from my husband. I went to college for professional writing with, again, like I said, the intent of always getting to this point. I had two small children. I was going to school full time. I was working two freaking jobs. I
Yeah.
decided to double major for
Yeah.
whatever
I've been
reason.
there.
I mean, like I look back and I'm like, I wouldn't change it for the world, but oh my God, what was I doing?
Yeah, I get it.
Um, and I came out of it with this really strong determination that, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a writer. And it has been really difficult. The process of learning how to write the book
Mm,
has been to make it readable. And I
yeah.
don't, I just the drafting phase and all of that. The hardest part for me, though, was really getting my feet in as a ghostwriter,
Mm,
having people tell me daily that it is my fault that their book isn't selling when they weren't marketing it, having
yeah.
people, expect insane amounts. I would write 50,000 words, a full novel in 5 weeks, and then have them tell me, well, something's missing. Yes, it's a first draft, but they
My
want to they
goodness.
want to
Yeah.
publish it every 5 weeks. So
Yeah.
that's really where it was hard for me, and it did help me build that, like, super thick skin. And it did piss me off a lot too.
Yes, I can see
uh,
that. That would be
yeah,
woo.
yeah. It's still, because I don't know. So I have a really strong inclination to never piss on anybody's win. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I always want to encourage people to
Mhm.
do what is right. I didn't grow up like that, and not that that's a whole other, sorry, but I never believed in myself enough, and it was
Yeah.
because I was constantly told that I wasn't good enough. And at this point, just it always makes me angry, because if they're saying it to me, they're saying it to other people,
Yeah.
and I can deal with it, but don't say it to other people. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so now it looks so easy. I get so many comments about, like, oh, how do you do that so fast? Oh, how do you blah blah blah? I'm like, but I've been doing it since 2019. I purposefully wrote books on a short time span so I could learn how to write a book. I did
Yeah.
all of this stuff. I went through it. I don't ever expect anybody. I never compare myself to the next person anymore because of that. Like, my kids are 22 and 19. They don't live at my house anymore. I had them when I was in my early 20s. So, like, my situation is completely different.
Mhm.
I feel like I went off on a tangent, so I'm
No, you're
sorry.
good.
But the hardest part was learning how to let other people's comments, really just let them go.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, just so you know, like sharing those personal things, I think that people watching need to know that there's real people and that the people that are doing these things, the people that are selling their books and writing their books and publishing, whichever mode they choose,
Mhm.
they're not, strange entities that are out there on the internet. Like these are real grounded people with real
Mhm.
lives and stuff happens. People say mean things, people do weird stuff. Life gets in the way. I mean, I life gets in the way for me all the time. And that sort of just unbeatable mindset is
Mhm.
so important. I mean, I'm in digital marketing. I mean, I have to do that to sell my stuff and to reach people. And I mean, that's how we found each other is through
Yeah,
online. Um, that is, it is a brutal place
it is.
and it can feel absolutely demoralizing sometimes to log on. And when I first started out, to agree with you, what you were saying, my coach told me the number one reason people fail in the space that I'm in is because they give up. Like we talked about
Yep.
before, they quit. They just,
Mhm.
it's just like, if you can outlast these people, you can outlast 90% of your competition.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's sad. I wish nobody gave up, but that's just the reality. Some people say it's not for me, or maybe they don't want to deal with that mental, helmet they have to put on every single day. But it's
Mhm.
true. Sometimes you got to just grit through it and put your blinders on and not pay attention to what anybody else is saying to you and say, I believe in myself. That could be delusional, but I believe in myself and we're going to go with it.
Right. And yeah. And I don't even know, like, because writing, just even sitting down and writing every day, I know is very difficult because I used to be in that space, but I did
Yeah.
literally train my brain to
Yeah.
just keep doing it because that was my livelihood at the point.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and it didn't pay a lot, but I got so much training from it. I would never recommend anybody go be a ghostwriter for people that came out of these
Yeah.
academies because they have ridiculous expectations. They
Yeah.
have pay you nothing, and but also I learned so much. So it's like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
really weird balance.
Yeah. And I also just want to say too, on that note, what I do is a little bit different because like I make a product and I sell the product and I help writers write. But when you're writing a book, your heart and soul is in that book.
Mhm.
It takes another level of vulnerability
Yep.
to say, I'm going to sell this book that I wrote that my heart is in. Like at the end of the day, it's pretty easy for me to detach and just say, like, this is my business, put it away. But when it's your book, it's your baby. And so like I just want to say like to anybody watching this, like I'm not belittling the fact that it's really difficult, and putting on that like mental that mental stability you need is one of the hardest things you'll ever learn to do. So I want to make sure that we're very clear about that. And I
Yeah.
mean, you've been clear about it, but I don't want people to say, "Oh, Rachel, you don't understand." I do understand. I get it.
Well,
But let's
and
talk
when
about, yeah,
sorry, no, when you write, you have such a connection to the characters,
yeah,
especially when they're your own, because you feel what they're feeling, you sense what they're sensing. You're going through that whole world with them through the entire thing. So it's definitely it's a unique connection.
yeah, absolutely. And talking about book marketing, that's kind of my next question here. Was there anything that you found to be really successful, or just anything you would say to someone who's looking at marketing their book for the first time?
Time. Give
Yeah,
yourself time, um, or put all of your money into marketing.
yeah,
I
yeah,
never fully endorse that because I don't believe that you create the same kind of engagement that you will if you are on the floor building from the ground up. Having a budget and giving marketing is definitely you have to do it.
yeah.
I really help people try to do organic as much as possible because we
Mm-hmm.
don't have all the money in the world. We don't do that stuff. But giving yourself enough time. Some of the experts that I've spoken with, and I can give you resources if you'd
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Also, they say at least 3 to 6 months. I have found that on Instagram, because that's my home. I don't have
yeah,
TikTok. I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet.
yeah, yeah. I'm on Instagram too, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah. The longer that you start talking about your book, the better.
Mm,
Um, I and it's a really tricky balance because if you start talking about your book 9 months in advance, you really have to it has to be continuous because people will forget, and they don't forget
yes,
because they don't care. They forget
yeah,
because they have full lives and all of these other
yeah,
things.
yeah,
So that's the best thing that I've found that works for me. It
yeah.
does.
No, that's a really good point. And like I can say like I'm pretty good at marketing on my own side. I can market my own stuff and do a
Yeah.
pretty good job with it. Back to that vulnerability thing, it's a different level of vulnerability when you market your books. And I
Yeah.
think explaining it's really helpful for me even to hear that the amount of time is a lot longer. And I'll add too for our students who are listening later, 180 days is what business coaches in my space say before you even start talking about a product you're going to sell.
Mhm.
180 days of just building awareness is what you need. So you think about it the same way with a book. People need to know about it and they need to know about it every day. And the
Mhm.
reason why it's every day is because you are competing on basically for the mental real estate of the other person, and you're competing against millions of marketing agencies all over the world for that same little piece of space in their brain. So it's not that they don't care about you, it's
Yeah.
not that they don't like you, it's that they are so tired, you know. And I think I said this to my Instagram course, so some of our watchers will know this, but like, you just have to make it so easy for them to communicate
Yes.
and to like reconnect with your book. Like, they have to be able to just one click of a button, okay, yeah, I want to be part of this, this is for me.
Well, and to add on to that point, to give people a perspective who are watching this, 11,000 books are published daily.
Yeah.
Daily. So
Yeah.
it's, you have to talk about your book. I did not want to do social media until I love it now, which is so random.
It's funny how that works.
It is. Like, again, 2010 versus 2024, 2025 is a very different online experience for me, because I've lived a lot of life and I understand some things.
Yeah.
But I still think it's a lot of a different, atmosphere. But because these clients refused to go online and market, they threw some money at Facebook for Facebook ads, but that's not enough. Depending on what kind of indie publishing route you want to take, you really need to get down on the ground, really figure out what kind your voice is and everything. But you have to tell people. I hadn't been on social media since 2010, and it took me a minute to sort of catch my bearings and everything like that. I took a master class because I was like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And it has helped. And I really wanted to come into Instagram being genuine and forming those kind of connections with my audience. I can't do it for everyone, but I do it as much as I can. And I think that is what worked for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's I think you touched on the organic audience, which is my main audience. I don't pay for ads right now for anything. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, there's not, but with social media, with ads, with marketing, with talking about your book, it is a skill. And a lot of writers assume, well, I wrote the book, therefore someone should read it. And that's not the case. And I get a lot of people in my inbox asking me to read their book. I wish I had the time and the mental real estate to say yes to every single person in my DMs. I don't. But my brain automatically prioritizes the people who are constantly talking to me, the people in my DMs, or constantly in my DMs talking about real stuff, not just will you read my book, but like, hey, I saw this post, or, I thought of you, or something like that. Or the people in my comment section commenting on the stuff that I do, or commenting on, an encouraging, hey, I saw you, I hope you're doing okay. Like, building those relationships with people has sold more books to me. Like, I have bought so many indie books from people that have just been persistent.
Thank you for buying my book too, or you were ARC, but thank you for reading my book too.
Absolutely. And that's,
I think that's how we connected.
Exactly. And it's because, you showed up so consistently, and I just saw it all the time. And I have people from all over the world constantly vying for my attention. And so this is like, I am proof that it works. I am proof that when you are consistent and you're not shy about it, and you're not ashamed of it, and you're not scared, oh, I already posted this already, who cares? Post it again, talk about it again,
Well, yeah. And that's a really interesting point too. And I don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I have so many people. So first, there's two things.
Go ahead.
Because I form because of the strategy that I use, I do know a lot of my followers, and we do have a really good connection. I put out a novella that is basically just a teaser to get ARC readers to get email addresses. So I give you a novella. It was 77 pages digital. Super short.
I think I got it.
If you read it, let me know. I hope you like it.
Yeah.
It's gotten really good reviews. Somebody put it on Goodreads. It can't be on Goodreads. It can't. It doesn't have an identifying number. It is not an Amazon. It is through BookFunnel. So somebody liked it enough to put it on Amazon, or sorry, Goodreads.
Yeah.
I didn't look at it that way at first. But other indie publishers are like, you don't understand. People don't review stuff. They just don't.
Yeah.
You have to like
Yeah.
beg them for that. But because this happened, I was like talking to people. I'm like, I don't even know what to think about this. This is so weird. So some of those people went in and they were like, no, this is a good thing. They liked your stuff enough to put it on Goodreads. But then another thing happened, and I was talking to my writer group, these people who I do, talk to every day, and we're friendly to a really personal point. And I was like, this happened, and every single one of those people went to my Goodreads page and they reviewed it. And then when my indie authors who have been doing this for years saw that I had 7 reviews after 24 hours, they were like, how did you do that? And I was like, it's 7 reviews. And they're like, they don't review. Like it's
yeah. Your reader to review ratio is so small, and it's just part of it.
It is. But I get a lot of questions about newsletters. I send my newsletter out twice a week. I have been in newsletters since 2015. This is why I'm very confident in my newsletter skills, but anybody can do it. People show up. I have a 60% open rate. I have a 20% click-through rate. They want to know you. They want to know you. They want to know your voice. They want to hear stuff. I do a Meet an Author Monday. So I included, other authors once a week.
Yes.
And then I give them like fiction writing, like writer, indie publisher life stuff on Fridays. Yeah. And they show up. Like, I love it. They do. They want it. So, make a newsletter. People want to know you.
Yes. I think that's like the biggest thing is people buy people, not books. I think when you're in the traditional space and you do have that marketing, it can help. But honestly, I have bought more books because someone I know told me to. Than from like an ad. I can't even remember the last time I saw a book ad. My friend would be like, hey, have you read this book? And I'm like, no. And the next thing I know, it's in my Amazon cart. So like, people want to have that personal connection. I think that's really important too, because a lot of writers, including myself and some of my students are very shy. That probably surprises a lot of people when I say I'm very shy. But it's something that we have to remember, that showing up on camera, it's a skill. It doesn't have to be your favorite thing ever. It's a skill. It's just part of the job. And so I think approaching it with that kind of attitude makes it a little bit easier, at least in my experience.
Well, and again, like internet and everything where you have to do it. I'm never going to say don't do it. People have come to me for advice and they say, I don't want to be on social media. And I say, then you're not going to succeed the way you want to succeed. I hate saying that to people, but it's really hard to be rigid in this kind of industry.
Right.
You don't have to like it, but I have so many author friends who, I'm an introvert. I get it. I work from home. Like I don't. And if I'm in public too long, it drains the crap out of me. But I have indie author friends who are faceless and they do it all the way. And they're successful. So that always just sort of nails that, puts that nail in that coffin. Like you can do it your way. You just have to find out what way works for you.
And you have to be willing to learn and keep an open mind. I mean, I think I read a book about business and a book about marketing and a book about, all of these topics at least one a week. And I have for years. And I always like, oh, I'm overwhelmed with all the stuff I'm learning. But that's what it takes. That's a big part of the process. So let's pivot. We've got about 20 minutes left in our conversation. I'd like to know if you could tell us a little bit about your book. If you want to introduce your book to everybody and tell us to start, like what inspired it and anything you want to share on that front.
Thank you. Sorry if I talked too much and we didn't get to answer the other question. Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Anybody can reach out to me too if they have questions. Just shoot me an email. I keep my inbox real clean. So
awesome. Better than me. I'm a little bit bad about it. So
Well, and again, that's like what works best for your mind. So my novel is a new adult dark fantasy. I purposefully put sex in it, so it would not be marketed or could not be marketed to young adult because my themes were not young adult, but my characters are 18 through 20.
Yes.
And it could have very easily went on there. So there's Open Door Saints on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although again, people are saying the spice is really low. So I'm like, that's just an opinion thing. It's about a girl and young woman. She's 18 and she discovers she has magical powers. And with this opening of, this whole magical world also comes all of this trauma that she'd forgotten that her mother had put her through. Well, her family, but her mother mostly. Mm-hmm. And so it has a lot of CPTSD themes.
Yeah.
And read the trigger warnings. I've been told definitely read the trigger warnings, which are there.
Thank you. That's so helpful and so needed. I've been pushing for that for so long.
You're welcome. Well, and so it's really about her discovering her power, and it's really about her reconnecting with the healthier parts of her world that were forgotten while unraveling all of this terrible stuff. And I feel like it started off so I was a pretty dark kid, but it started off sort of as I always wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to a 4-year college. I wanted that experience. I wanted it so much. And I was always told, no, I couldn't do it. No, I wasn't going to succeed. It was all of those things. Mm-hmm. And so the college setting really comes, I think, from that. And I do have to say, well, I will not go back to college because I don't want to. It was such a huge confidence booster for me. And I learned so much. So I am always going to be a strong proponent of higher education.
Yeah.
And then it's a dual perspective with this. They're really balanced, I think, because he has a really strong family connection. He has a really strong confidence and all of those things. And I think that they play really well off of each other. Finn is sort of an amalgamation of sort of my healthier parts now. Mm-hmm. So I think about the things that I think that people should have said to them, especially when they've gone through a traumatic experience. And I kind of make that come out in my, I hate to say healthier characters, but like,
I get what you're saying.
So.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I like what you touched on there with these types of themes, because one of the things I see in books that maybe don't do as well is they do have strong themes and they do have strong characters, but they struggle to make that connection with why the reader cares. Mm-hmm. And, it has really nothing to do with the quality of the writing, but why should the reader have a stake in the story? And that's something that I felt when I was reading this. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never been in this exact situation. I'm not waking up with memories of magic and all the things like your characters are experiencing. But, touching on that feeling of, the sort of, oh, this is a part of my life that I didn't expect to ever have to deal with, or any of those things, is what draws a reader in and what makes them want to keep reading. And that's the important part. And that's one thing that I was really excited about, especially because when I find one and that's what happens, I'm like, oh yes, this writer's got it. So that's really exciting. And I'm glad you touched on that. And I also wanted to add on this new adult genre distinction. I'm really happy about. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad it's something we're starting to see a lot of. I kind of, whenever I see a young adult book that has, sex scenes in it, whether it's open door or closed door, I get really upset because I come from the movie industry, and in the movie industry, it is 9 times out of 10 predatory. And so I'm like, the author may not have ill intentions, but there are huge repercussions when the wrong person stumbles across this. Yeah. And so while I'm never going to tell somebody what to put or what not to put in their books, I love that now we have a place where this fits and we can make an informed decision about what we're reading and what other people are reading. If you have children, you can help them decide to make good choices. And
Mhm.
I just love that you made that distinction. 100% clap, clap, clap. Love it. Okay.
Thank you. And honestly, I don't know. Everybody has mental health issues, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that is really, I think, the basis of why I wanted to write this book. I have CPTSD. I have chemical imbalances because of the way that, I
Yeah,
grew
yeah.
up and everything like that. And I've gotten so many people saying thank you for this.
Yeah.
However, I didn't want to market it to at teenagers because
Right.
while it's important to have that mental health representation, some of the themes I think are pretty dark that I write
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want to censor that.
I completely get where you're coming from. And I think in my studies of genre, trying to find the right genre for my own work, that's been a big question mark too. So anybody watching is like, yeah, it's okay. You could be confused a little bit.
Yes, and you can be. I didn't settle on my actual genre until probably about a month into when I started doing social media. And I started doing social media 6 months before I published my book.
Yeah.
So that book was written a million times over. I had no freaking clue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people are still pegging it as different genres too. So I can market
Yeah.
it all I want to as this, but people are still going to pick. But you still need to,
Mhm.
you still need to have a demographic to market to.
Yeah, yeah, you get as close as you can, and then you get really grateful for the people who do show up. That's awesome. I'm gonna kind of mix a few of our questions together here because I think I've got one that I think you'll really like to answer. So, one of the phenomena I see a lot with my students and with myself too is when we are writing something that we don't expect anyone else to read, we write very differently than when
Mhm.
we are writing something we know someone else is going to read. So our question here was, what's one of the most challenging parts? So I guess that's the first part. And did you experience anything like that when you decided you were going to publish this?
Um, so I went to therapy for 12 years, and that really helped prepare me
Yeah.
to have all of my doors open and to not be fearful of that vulnerability. When I first started writing and I hadn't gone to therapy, or I didn't get, the medication for my chemical imbalance and all of these things.
Hmm.
I was horrified to put my real self on a page because I knew, which was a lie. I knew everybody was going to be judging me, and I was going to just be told all of the same messages that I was told, growing up
Yeah.
and all of those things. So I totally get that. I totally like I still even feel it now, like the terror of
Yeah.
putting myself down on a thing. And that's like I didn't go there before because I was so afraid to touch it myself,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
that I just I couldn't put it on paper because I think that it was more of me and my ego and me not trusting myself enough and not that's really it. I think
Yeah.
I was, even now, like I can still feel like I was terrified of
Yeah.
putting myself on a paper.
Yeah. No, I completely get that too. And I think something that happens is when we kind of self-edit like that and we self-filter like that, we think, well, someone can attack this because it's not really me.
Yeah.
Whereas when we put something we do truly care about, the consequence is that a lot of times it stinks. Like, but if you write something we truly care about and it's really, really good, and, a lot of times we run the risk of, okay, if someone insults this or gives it a 1 star or says something nasty about it, like, then it's really going to hurt more. And the truth is neither of those things are important because the people that hate what you say, they don't matter.
Right. I had a DE that I was working with, and she was amazing. She used to work for Kirkus Reviews, and she said one of the very first things that she told me was, "You will always find an audience, always,
Yes.
even people who don't hone their writing and craft and stress over writing for so many,
Yeah.
for years and everything like that, they still find an audience. So that's something that I keep with me all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a really important thing to remember. If only because, we think we go into writing and we think that we have to do all of this funny business just to find someone to read it. And the truth is, if you show up consistently, like we've been talking about this whole time, if you
Yep.
show up and you just refuse to quit, you're going to find somebody. And even if you're, you find one person and that person, like, you are now their favorite author
Yeah.
forever, like, that one person is worth it. And I think that's something really important to remember. And if that doesn't feel like it's worth it, then I would honestly challenge that and go back to, why are you writing the story?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get your name in lights and you don't TikTok or Instagram,
And it doesn't happen overnight.
right. And if that doesn't happen to you, or you're scared that's not going to happen to you, it might just be that you're a regular person and you want to be acknowledged for your work. But if that's really the reason that you don't write the way you want to, I would seriously challenge that and say, like, okay, what are my real motivations for showing up here? Because if you are showing up for any other reason than I want to write a story that resonates with people, or you're showing up with the wrong motivations, then most of the time you're not going to have what it takes to stick it out.
Right.
And so, not to be like negative, but that's a really important thing to remember, especially in this very, very competitive space where you are your biggest champion. So,
yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't put any money into marketing my novel the way that it is. It for indie publishers, it takes probably, this is what an average amount of people say.
yeah,
So that's,
yeah,
I don't have like quotes or anything. It takes about 5 books before indie authors start making money.
yeah.
So I haven't really, and I'm going to, but I haven't put any money into marketing my book. That being said, no one has bought my book since my family and friends. The first month I sold quite a few, but those were all my family and friends.
Yeah.
I went to a signing that I had to set up myself at a coffee shop with people that I knew.
That I didn't know was happening.
Yes.
I would have come.
Well, I have some really exciting news about that, about another signing too.
That's exciting.
I don't want to keep everybody, but I'll tell you about it online. But you didn't know. But nobody knew because I forgot the date. Like, I knew it was the 22nd. I knew it was coming. I thought it was next week. It's not. It was Thursday, and I was like, oh shit, I have to do this because there's so much stuff to do. I had 9 people come to my signing. Most of them were the baristas that I work with. Some of them had my book. I signed their books. My son brought 2 books for him and his partner. My father brought his book. One of my friends came because I had ended up telling her at some random point, and she remembered. So she bought a second book because she couldn't find her own one. And then I had one person that I did not know buy a book from one of my local bookstores. She had already bought it. The book was already signed. She's a big person in our lit scene in Youngstown. It's called Lit Youngstown. So she wanted to come meet me, introduce me to the society. I don't want to call it a society, but the group.
I get what you mean, yeah.
And she was the only person that came to my signing that wasn't someone I knew or saw every day. And I didn't sell her a book because I had already sold her a book at the local bookstore. And that was my day. Like, that was 2.5 hours of my time. And that's what I expected to happen. Even less so, I expected it to happen because I forgot to advertise about it.
Yeah.
But
that's still so cool.
Yeah. So that's sort of the expectations I try to give everybody. Like, that's what you're in for. It's a long, long road, whatever road you decide to walk on.
Yeah, I love that. Well, is there any parting advice or anything that you would tell our students about this process before we say goodbye? Anything at all you want to add about anything we've talked about today, or things we haven't talked about yet?
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys for listening to me talk. This is still a little bit new for me, so I'm sorry if I talk too much.
You are great.
Thank you. But it's really overwhelming. If you guys decide to go down this path, you're going to be so overwhelmed because there are so many little things that have to happen. And
Mhm.
when you first start out, you're not going to know everything. And when you first start out, what you know as you learn will change. So take it
Yeah.
one step at a time. I get overwhelmed all the time, and I have to always step back and be like, okay, one thing at a time, which is why I
Yeah.
didn't, which is why I forgot that, you're supposed to market your signings. Um, so like it is going to be overwhelming, but if you take a step back and continually remind yourself one step at a time, it'll
Yeah.
it'll it'll be a good weight off. Or you can always reach out to me too. I'm happy
Yeah.
to I do indie publishing consulting, so I can do that as well to help, because nobody should do it alone, and you can't,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's just one step at a time.
That's fantastic. No, it's been such an honor to have you come talk to us
Oh,
today.
thank you.
I love hanging out with you here in the community. It was so
Yeah,
cool to read your book.
thank
I know
you.
my students are really excited too. So, that's I'm gonna call it for today. But of course, if you have any questions for me, any of my students, or questions for Kara,
Yeah,
you can send them to me and I'll get in touch with her. This has been so much fun. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
thank you.
And I will see you all next time, okay?